This episode is brought to you by Fuli Gemstones. I do think that for women in particular who are living pretty difficult lives, who have left their homes, who are living with conflict, who can't leave their homes in some cases, it does matter to do something that brings a bit of pride and joy and relief and meditation. It is different than just getting a paycheck, I think.
I think that's part of the sort of magic, the alchemy of jewellery is that, you take a flat sheet of metal and you, with your two hands and the tools you have, can transform that into something, the polish, the reflection, and if you set a stone, and within a few days you can be wearing something that you've created out of that flat sheet of metal, and that's kind of magic, really.
Welcome to If Jewels Could Talk. I'm Karen Woolton, the voice of jewellery, an author, broadcaster, and the woman who initiated the role of jewellery editor at magazines like Tatler and British Vogue. This is a podcast for everyone, for people who do like jewellery, for people who don't realise they like jewellery, and anyone intrigued by fascinating facts, new ideas, and forgotten histories. So please join me as I tell sparkly tales, meeting all sorts of people, delving into 4 centuries of jewellery culture, and investigate what's happening now. So welcome to If Jewels Could Talk. I'm very happy to talk about a very important initiative this morning that's happening for women in different areas of conflict. And I'm joined by Pippa Small, jewellery designer, anthropologist, activist, traveller. I mean, she's so many things. She's also the only person I'm going to allow on the podcast to make a noise. Usually I say to people, take off everything. But Pippa never takes her jewellery off. How many bracelets do you have on, Pippa?
Oh my God. I have no idea. I would say maybe 40 or something.
They're 40. They're all stones. They're turquoise. They're labradorite. They're amethyst. What else are there? Crab beads.
There's all sorts of things. They're all gathered from years and years of,
And you never take these off?
No, never.
She's got probably 5 large necklaces on of huge pieces of labradorite. Massive. So she's the only person that I'm not telling not to make noise, because it's you. You sleep in them, don't you?
Yeah.
How do you sleep at night with all this going on?
I just curl up with them. I like them. I like the weight. I like the feel. I don't know. It's been years and years. I'm used to it. I think my children the other day were horrified when I had to take off the big shelf or something, and they were kind of, you've never seen your wrist, put it back.
They have naked
It's
wrist.
not you. Yeah, so I put it back, and that's that.
So what we're going to talk about first is Turquoise Mountain. For anyone who doesn't know, it is an incredibly important charity that was founded by the King.
It was.
And could you tell us a little about the initiative and how it started?
It started in 2006 as, I think, a conversation between the then Prince Charles and Hamid Karzai. And I think the idea was a recognition that people in conflict areas, in Afghanistan in particular, where it started, need a sense of culture, a sense of heritage and continuity and history in the past, and that's sort of personified by things like architecture and craft. And so I think there was a pragmatic side, which was to see that craft can provide jobs. It can give a sense of self-confidence, a sense of grounding of place and pride, and that to continue, because after so many years of conflict, these sort of precious skills do disappear. And I think Afghanistan was at that point where some of the master wood carvers were, working in the market selling vegetables, and there was obviously no space during conflict for these arts. So I think the point was to kind of stop, and before things had disappeared, give them space and give them the respect and the continuation by training young people in these skills. And so it's an incredibly insightful and enlightened position to take, I think, because in conflict, that so much is lost, but the importance of having a sense of who you are, history is so important for us as humans. And I think they kind of did an incredible job with Rory Stewart creating this beautiful institute, which is in an old part of the city, but it's kind of all thick earth architecture, so walls that are incredibly deep, and carved jali work in the wood. So you have this scent of pine, you have this beautiful wall. It's just kind of everything in there is tactile and sensual and beautiful. And I think when people come, the students, when they come in off the streets of this city that's in this sort of turmoil and there's too many guns and tanks and tension, they come into the school, and I think the beauty of it and the serenity of the craftsmanship just makes people feel different, makes them feel better, and a kind of cocoon of being wrapped up in something that is about the goodness in humans, what we can do that's beautiful, as opposed to the destruction that we're also capable of. But I think the school that they started there is an extraordinary example of something that was very important and has been incredibly successful, training thousands of young people in jewellery making and woodwork.
In jewellery making, in
calligraphy, woodwork, ceramics, miniature painting,
furniture.
Yeah.
And using indigenous materials
Exactly.
that they can get hold of locally.
Yeah.
I guess it's part of reminding people of their identity,
Yes,
their
exactly.
culture.
Exactly. That's the key.
As you say, before it's wiped out or taken away.
Yeah.
The other vital part is it's enabling people to be employed and to economically survive.
Exactly. The most crucial part at the end of the day is their jobs provided. And as we know in countries like Afghanistan, every one person who's working and bringing in an income is supporting, 30 other people. So it's kind of each person is so crucial in keeping communities alive, particularly for women when the project started. It was, a vital source of independence and having a sort of sense of autonomy and self-determination, which was amazing. People making decisions for themselves. It's a revolutionary and fantastic thing. But the income was vital and continues to be vital. It's the most important part of the whole project. It gives an income and a livelihood through creativity, which is even better.
And how many are there? How many Turquoise Mountains in particular cities are there?
Well, there's Kabul, there is in Saudi Arabia, in Myanmar, and in Jordan.
And it's sort of counterintuitive that jewellery would be very important in times of conflict.
It completely seems mad. It's true. When you think of women and what jewellery seems to represent to us, it does seem completely counterintuitive, as you say. But it has its place, and it's amazing that it does. And I think jewellery in particular, because of its kind of emotional context, because of its relationship to memory, to the fact that we love it so much and we treasure it, and it's got an economic value, but it's also something very emotionally powerful in jewellery, as we know. So I think the fact that jewellery has a role at this time is interesting. But it allows women to still feel feminine, still feel beautiful, still, these qualities that even in conflict, life goes on. People fall in love and get married and children are born and meals are cooked. And despite things that are going on in the rest of the country, it's sort of life goes on. So I think jewellery somehow speaks to that. It's kind of, women still want to feel they make things and create beautiful things that makes their soul feel soothed, perhaps.
Actually, when I've gone through the Vogue archives for when I was writing Vogue the Jewellery, during the war years, particularly the First World War, Vogue was admonishing readers, saying just because there is a war on, there's no excuse for
not curling your hair.
Not looking after yourself, not presenting yourself. You need to buy jewellery.
Yes.
And
how interesting.
They were sort of admonishing them, saying, this is something you must do, which is important.
Yeah.
So you were very closely involved in the setting up of these centres.
Yeah, I came on board in 2008, and that actually the school hadn't yet been built, so there was teaching going on, but the centre hadn't actually been finished. And part of what I came out to do on the first trip was to create a collection that was inspired by the Bactrian. Did you see the Bactrian collection? It was at the British Museum, and then it was in the Metropolitan, and it's a collection of gold that was kept in the museum in Kabul, and it was from the Silk Route. So you had the Chinese influence, you had Greek and Roman, you had Indian, even Indonesian, and it was, as Afghanistan was almost the centre of the Silk Route, the treasures that were there from thousands of years ago were extraordinary, particularly the gold work. And that collection was kind of taken out of Kabul. I think it was buried actually during the 90s when the Taliban were in power last time, to keep it safe. And then it was taken out of the country, and it's been touring ever since. But the idea initially when I went out was to create a collection inspired by these ancient treasures that potentially could be sold in museums alongside and things. So that was my first introduction. And going out was kind of, I don't know, it was one of those, I knew it was going to be really important the moment I said yes. And now, nearly 15 years later, it's still such an enormous part of my life. But it was a sort of life-changing trip because it was a country that I had known about and always been fascinated with, but had never imagined I'd get the opportunity to go. And arriving in this, I mean, I suppose it was 8 years after the change of government and things, but it was a fascinating and beautiful, and I just fell in love with every aspect, the people, the landscapes. It still is just an incredible place. So that was the beginning of the sort of love affair with the country and the culture.
And you're there encouraging women and men to learn to design.
Yes. I mean, the design process has been very interesting because it's sort of, Afghanistan was quite a sort of isolated and very traditional country. And I think the idea at the time for an artisan was to copy their teacher, their ustad, as exactly and precisely as they could, so that, generation after generation, they would recreate as closely as they could the work from the past. Of course, it would change and develop, but it didn't kind of explode. I mean, when you think of these sort of ideas from the West of creating designs that are, all about us, it's my design. This is something I have created and thought of and, imagined and visualized and now made real. These were completely alien concepts. It was sort of, it's a collective aesthetic that just kind of kept rolling. And so when we sort of started working and it was, about looking and talking to young people about, when they'd say, well, how do you know what to design? To kind of start using their eyes in a different way and exercising a different muscle of looking for inspiration everywhere in their homes, in the city, in their mother's dress, the embroidery and the plates, finding inspiration in ceramics and cobblestones, in patterns, and, just starting to use a different set of senses in a way. But it was quite an odd idea because it was like, this sort of egocentric idea of it being somehow a kind of individually created idea was quite alien. And so it's been an interesting process of looking at, because what they have that's particularly strong is their heritage and their culture. It's not that they need to compete with China or India that are producing jewellery at extraordinary volumes and scales and things. They have to talk about what's theirs because that's what's unique about what they have. So just that process of learning to look, I'm sort of looking around the room trying to find examples, but you find textures and patterns and then you just think, how do we want to recreate that in something that works with the body? And that was a process that was really interesting. And now men and women are coming up with amazing designs, often inspired by a grandmother's necklace or just things they feel they want to express, but in a very beautiful collective way, not in this kind of ego-driven way I think we sometimes fall victim to here.
And these translate very well because you often have exhibitions and sales at your shop in London's Notting Hill. Yeah. And I've seen them. I mean, they're beautiful designs.
Yeah, thank you.
And they're very wearable.
Yeah, I think that's been the challenge actually everywhere I work from Colombia and Myanmar and different parts of Africa, is to kind of pull out an essence or a voice, if you like, or a kind of handprint of somewhere and be able to translate it to a market that is elsewhere, where people may not particularly be interested in Afghanistan or may not know anything about Myanmar or Middle Eastern cultures or African, but you kind of hope that it translates in a way that you just think, I love this piece of jewellery, but perhaps they feel somewhere, even if it's subconsciously, that someone made this and that person has a whole life and a history and emotional life, but somewhere it's embedded in that piece. That's my hope, that it kind of comes across.
And sparks an interest, sparks a conversation and finding out about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And where it came from and what the inspiration was. And then you want that drawn back towards some of these women creators, these female creators, to help them and support them.
Exactly.
And I guess the more feedback they get from is better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's very far away and it's quite cut off. And I think the fact that their jewellery and their work is sold around the world and being bought and worn by women in other places is such an incredibly important and powerful message for them. They're being heard and seen and their work is appreciated. It's amazing.
So there must have been many obstacles in setting up these centres.
I think Turquoise Mountain does an incredible job of quietly getting on, diplomatically kind of doing what they need to do.
We're going to ask Shoshana about some of those obstacles, but you personally travelling to some of these places must have been very difficult.
There have been times when there have been incidences and attacks in the city when I've been there, and it can be quite frightening.
What's the most frightened you've been?
I think I remember once there was an attack, and I remember phone not working and not knowing. There was sort of rumours are always kind of the most alarming things, like all foreigners being rounded up and killed or something, and you just get this kind of, where do I go, what do I do? But it was never like that. It was always fine. But there can be moments when you feel a little like, I think there was once an attack outside a workshop where I was working, but again, everyone in the workshop was so calm and reassuring. I remember the women coming in, holding my hand and saying, "Don't worry, we'll look after you." And me thinking, here we are, a bunch of women in a room with no entrance or exit other than onto the street. But it was fine. It was kind of, I think what I tended to do was get very nervous before travelling. And I was there a few months ago, which was the first time since the change of government and post-COVID. And so I was a little nervous about, what sort of reception I'd have. But actually, once I'd sort of got over the initial fears and once landing, you just felt, I'm here. And then to see everyone in the workshop was the greatest joy, and everyone we work with. It was just a sort of, to say it was an amazing trip is an understatement. Of course, economically things are very challenging and things are hard, but to be able to see people again and just, hold hands and smile and was amazing. It was truly an incredible trip.
Because you over the years, you've taken your young children on these travels.
I have taken them places, but never to Afghanistan, I have
Not
to say.
Afghanistan.
No, I hope one day, but not now.
I remember actually, for my book, The New Stone Age, we talked about sometimes your fear of travelling beforehand, and you take turquoise with you,
yes,
don't you?
Yes. I'm so superstitious. I'm probably putting this on the children now. They start getting, you must wear this bead, and and I do it to them when they go somewhere. It's like, you have to wear this tie, all this jewellery on them, and
so what do you tie on them? What do you tie on them
for
safekeeping?
The poor things. They both have navratnas that are made just for them with a stone doctor in India who each stone was kind of checked to make sure it was right for each child. And then they have sort of evil eye beads with sort of, natural agates with eyes on them to keep them safe, and their birthstone or poor little things weighed down with
and what do they like you to wear? What do they pick up for you to wear?
Well, something they've made perhaps, because they go in the stone drawers and pull things out and make things, and then they tie them on and ensure that I make sure I bring it back with me when I come safely home.
That's very sweet.
Sweet, but I'm probably instilling a kind of neurotic.
No, it's sort of like you're taking something of them with you, so that's probably very comforting to them, isn't it?
It is, and to me, actually.
And so now recently you've taken the legacy of Turquoise Mountain and created something new.
Zindagi now.
Zindagi.
Zindagi.
And could you tell us about Zindagi and how it's built on Turquoise Mountain, but it's starting something new?
Exactly. It's a fantastic initiative that my partner in Afghanistan, business partner, and I started last spring. And the idea is to create a safe space for women to produce jewellery and have training on the side, but it's kind of a production unit. So they have a safe job to earn an income, to be together, most importantly, so they can talk and laugh and gossip. And
this is allowed by the Taliban?
It has been allowed, as it's a workplace, which is, I think the new government is well aware that women have to earn an income and help support families. So they have.
And you can only have women in there.
It's just women guides, women teachers. And it's a wonderful atmosphere. It's productive. Their work is beautiful. It gives them such a sense of pride, and it's amazing. It's also, a vital source of income for them. They're supporting their families, their parents, their children, grandchildren, some of them. Some of them are younger, some older, all different backgrounds. But
so how many women?
At the moment, there's 60. And we would like to increase
ages.
All different ages and all different backgrounds. So some women had been professionals, lawyers, some were school age. So a mixture of backgrounds. Some.
What are they speaking? What language?
Dari mostly, and some they're from all over the country. So you have Hazara and Pashtun, but it's just this beautiful kind of melting pot of women from different backgrounds, social backgrounds, economic backgrounds, and geographic, and they're working together and producing things and supporting each other and making a vital income. So
So this must be a very unusual thing in Kabul at the moment.
Yes, I think at the moment it is, and it's fantastic.
So it's a lifeline, literally a lifeline.
Yeah, it is.
To a lot of these women, and they must be very grateful to you.
They're the most wonderful group of women imaginable. I mean, just, I always think we use this word resilience now a little sort of loosely, but, truly to see these women who have challenges that we can't even imagine, but just to see their positivity and their smiles. And
so what kind of challenges? I mean, to get to you every day, what kind of challenges would they face?
We provide cars and taxis so that they can
it's
come to work.
It's not safe on the street for them.
I think it would be wiser to come by car and things. But it's more of the economic crisis. I think, work is... For families, a lot of jobs have been lost in general. So, everyone is relying on whoever can get a job is the breadwinner now. So,
and you give these women a hot meal in the middle of the day.
A hot meal, exactly. Hot meal and a warm space to work. And I think that the importance of being together cannot be underestimated as well, because, women who can't work, it's quite a tough life to be housebound. So the fact that they can get out and be together is priceless.
Have you had the first designs from them yet?
Yes. And they're fantastic. We sort of felt it was quite good as they are new to making and designing, to keep things quite simple. But in the end, simple is always the best, isn't it? I mean, that's the kind of the biggest challenge, is to create something simple that's beautiful and wearable and stunning. But, we don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. It's like beautiful cuffs, very simple bangles, really simple kind of textured rings, working in silver, beautiful earrings of kind of coiled silver, as well as there's one piece we're selling that is raising money for the meals and transport and so forth, and that's a rough piece of aquamarine, or two rough pieces of aquamarine in a kind of gold-plated ball, which is a really simple design, but the work they're doing is fantastic.
And where can people get hold of that? Can they get it on your website?
On the website, yes.
pippasmall.com.
Yes.
And will you have an exhibition in Notting Hill at any point?
I think we will, definitely. Where the work is, every day they're learning more, and the sales are great and really providing that lifeline. So, what do you call the little agate on the aquamarine? On the, it's the zindagi now necklace.
And so actually, we should all wear this as a sign of solidarity.
Yes, it's so
with
true.
These women,
because 100% of the profits are going to provide the meals and the transport and the rent and so forth. And it is a business, so the women are also being paid. It's just it's nice to help support the other parts.
And what is it on the?
It's on the gold cord. So it's a nylon cord that's gold. It's a gold thread. I mean, it doesn't contain gold, but it's gold coloured, and it has a little sparkle. So it's a lovely and strong, so it doesn't break. But yes, we should all wear them.
I'm definitely going to wear a Zindagi pendant.
They would be very proud.
And I've seen your photographs coming back from these places. They wear the most bright, colourful clothes, don't they? They look so beautiful.
Yeah, I think they're so proud of, their particular, whichever, ethnic group they're from. Like the Pashtun have, beautiful embroidery and, with the mirrored belts and the beautiful sleeves, and they're amazing. Yeah, really beautiful. All the colour that that's not what you expect when you think of Afghan clothing.
And what is their culture of wearing jewellery?
Deep and long culture of wearing jewellery. I suppose if you go back long enough, it was gold during that kind of Bactrian period when the Greeks were there and there was such extraordinary trade routes. And then more recently, I would say silver for daily, but equally when a woman gets married, it's gold. Gold.
And how much? As much as you?
As much as me. Depending how lucky she is. But big gold necklaces, and that will be hers. So, that's her
pension.
It's her pension, her insurance, everything, yeah. Yeah.
So it must be very noisy in the workshop with all of you clanking around.
Clanking and chatting. And yeah, I think the gold is reserved for special occasions. Yeah.
But lots of bracelets in the day.
Yeah, and they're so proud when they're wearing things they've made as well, which is really cool. Because that is I think that's part of the sort of magic, the alchemy of jewellery, is that, you take a flat sheet of metal and you, with your two hands and the tools you have, can transform that into something, the polish, the reflection, and if you set a stone, and within a few days you can be wearing something that you've created out of that flat sheet of metal, and that's kind of magic, really. It's a miracle. I find it everywhere we work in, with different refugee groups in Jordan and things. It's that sort of empowerment of transformation, taking something that I think traditionally would be quite a male-dominated area. They worked in the metal, the goldsmiths, and that tended to be men. And for a woman to take that and transform it into something she wears is very powerful, I think. And satisfying.
It is, and it's sort of wearing that power.
Yeah.
Wearing that power and taking it with you if they have to move.
Yeah.
You
And the skill.
take it. And the skill.
Which means they can set up a business anytime.
Since you established your business, you really have been the sort of ethical jeweller. You sort of have led the way, Pippa, because you were talking about this and where stones came from and the importance of where you sourced your gold, helping other artisans from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And you feel the industry is just sort of beginning to catch up with you.
It has been a slow. I think it's because I came from a background of anthropology and then working in human rights.
I was going to say, how important was your background in anthropology?
Hugely, because it's always been about people. I think that's, the starting point was about the people I worked with and how they lived their lives, how their work and as artisans, how that impacted and how it changed and was challenged and by circumstances. So it was always about people. And then, of course, the health and happiness of people is dependent on, where their materials are sourced and how they're sourced. So you look at miners and you look at extraction, and it all leads back, of course, to the earth. And that's obviously the biggest issue we have facing us with climate. But yes, it started with people, and it's always been the most centrally important things, and women, and then how we extract. But equally, this other layer of the continuation of culture is also as important to us as people, I think. So between, earth and how the mining is done, like this recent project we've been working in Colombia where the gold is panned, and to meet these women who are panning gold is incredible because they're very articulate, very political, and they're aware that gold has this kind of value to the community because it, as they say, it drives the engine of their entire economy. It was interesting to see gold in the positive, the bits of gold they pan with a wooden bowl and the way they did.
So there's
no mercury, no cyanide, no arsenic.
No one going down into dangerous tunnels.
No.
And plans for other centres?
Hopefully working with Palestinians. That's another project coming. And in my dreams of the next year or so, I would like to start working with a Roma community in Romania, which I think will be really interesting.
That would be so interesting.
Yeah. There's a project to work with Roma on all their traditional crafts, which is basket weaving and instrument making, but also metalsmithing and jewellery. So that one I'm really looking forward to.
They literally carried all their money in necklaces, didn't they? Gold coins.
Exactly.
And, yes.
Yeah, the root of jewellery.
Fabulous.
But yes, a lot of kind of dreams of different places to collaborate down the line.
Well, we wish you luck. Put on your turquoise, because how many months do you spend travelling a year?
Well, I seem to travel every month or so somewhere for longer or shorter trips, but a lot of travelling.
Well, you'll hear her coming, everybody. But I'm going to go and click on and get my Zindagi pendant now.
Thank you, Carol.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you, Pippa.
Thank you.
So now I'm delighted to continue the discussion about Turquoise Mountain with the president, Shoshana Stewart, who has been working with Turquoise Mountain for 17 years, since it was founded by the King and her husband, Rory Stewart, the ex-politician and founder of the worldwide global hit podcast, The Rest is Politics, with Alistair Campbell. So, Shoshana, thank you so much for joining us.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And you're in Jordan at the moment.
I am indeed.
And you're living in Jordan.
I do. It's a wonderful place to live. I highly recommend it.
And and that is probably the centre of Turquoise Mountain, is it?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of the projects have grown recently. Afghanistan is our heart and where we began, and I have about 230 full-time staff there, so that's our biggest project. But Jordan is very central, partially because it's the center of our work across the Levant, working with Syrian, Jordanian, Palestinian artisans. So feels very central, yes.
And what I'd love to know is, what was the premise behind it? Was this the King's idea? Was it between a discussion between Rory, your husband, and the King that they came up with the idea?
Yes, so how we began was a conversation between His Majesty the King when he was the Prince of Wales 17, 18 years ago with the then president of Afghanistan, President Karzai. And they were at the Prince's School of Traditional Arts in London, which is an extraordinary institution, just very high quality, wonderful art education, very grounded in Islamic art. And President Karzai said, "Oh, what a wonderful thing. I wish we had this in my country. We have these incredible traditions, but the younger generation is not taking them up," right? So the Prince of Wales, who really is a serial entrepreneur in some ways, said, "Yeah, let's do it." I don't think anybody thought that was actually going to happen. Called Rory, said, "Go to Kabul, check it out." Rory went thinking, this is not going to happen. And came back and said, "Actually, do you know what? I'd love to do it." Found an amazing neighborhood in the old city that was falling apart. Half the buildings had collapsed, and we started.
And he's an intrepid traveller, your husband.
He's done a bit of traveling. The Afghanistan connection for him was that he walked across quite a lot of Asia between 2000 and 2002. So Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, wrote a book about the Afghan section. So he had, spent time walking through Afghanistan in the winter of 2001, 2002. So right after the Taliban had been taken out of power last time. So experienced Afghanistan with no government, basically, but the extraordinary hospitality of being put up in village houses every night, week after week, and just seeing the country through nature and through this extraordinary minaret of jam in the middle of the mountains. And so I think he sort of fell in love with Afghanistan, which I eventually did too.
Which is why it's called Turquoise Mountain.
Which is why it's called Turquoise Mountain, yes.
Will you tell that story about what it's named after?
Absolutely. So you must look up the minaret of jam, the Minar-e-Jam. It is an extraordinary minaret in the center of Afghanistan, and it is the last remaining monument of the dynasty of the Turquoise Mountain. But nobody knows that anymore, and it was a civilization destroyed by Genghis Khan, and so it evokes a great civilization lost to history, which is so the point of Turquoise Mountain is to preserve the loss of traditions.
And your husband visited that and looked around it, and did he find anything there?
Well, yes, but didn't take any of it with him, crucially.
No.
He sort of walked up into the minaret and looked down, and, it's very, very empty, that part of Afghanistan. Very rural Afghanistan in the mountains. But when he got further up, he looked down and saw, all of these sort of pits and people all over, and what they were doing is digging up treasures and looting. Mm-hmm. But it's an extraordinary monument, and Afghanistan has an extraordinary history.
So he went to Kabul, and how long did it take him to get set up and founded in this building that he discovered?
Well, so I showed up about 6 months into the thing in September 2006. I was a teacher, a science teacher, and going on adventure, got a job volunteering with them. So I didn't know what I was doing. But my first sort of memory of Turquoise Mountain, and of him actually, is being picked up at the airport as a volunteer, driven to my new home, which was this 18th century mud fort on the outskirts of Kabul. On the wall, the 2-story high mud wall, were 2 pairs of legs. One was a shalwar kameez, the sort of wide-legged traditional Afghan trousers. And the other was a gray suit and sort of English brogues. And that was Rory sitting on the top of the wall talking to a mason. And I get in there, and there's already a calligraphy school and a woodworking school, and there are 100 masons fixing all these mud walls, fixing the tower, fixing up the building. So he got going very quickly. I think, that was a lesson for all of us. And that was a building that we restored and used as the beginning of this Institute for Afghan Arts and Architecture that has been running now for all that time, for 17 years. But that was our actually temporary home, because what we were doing was in the old city restoring 150 buildings, family houses, clinic, primary school, hammam, Bazaar Street, and eventually that would be the home of the Institute. So when we had restored enough of those buildings, the Institute moved into these incredible courtyard, mud brick timber frame courtyard buildings with these beautiful fruit trees in the middle of them, roses.
It sounds divine.
It is divine.
And how many skills are encompassed within those buildings? How many different skills, traditional crafts?
Gosh, I mean, countless. And we've had a lot of fun documenting them, from motifs to materials. So you have mud bricks, and not only the way you make mud bricks, but the way you use them. So these mud buildings are very seismically resistant. So they're done in these very diagonal patterns in between timber frames. So you have the timber building, you have the mud brick, then there is it's called simgal, which is the mud facade, and that's made of a particular type of clay with a particular sort of reed fiber, very fine fiber. So that's one type of mud plastering. Then there's decorative mud plastering, where they make very beautiful floral decorations. Sometimes they paint them. There's lime plastering. But then you get into carpentry. I mean, incredible wood carving. We do two types: Kabuli floral Timurid style wood carving, and then a shallower Nuristani style chip carving. But then you get into building trades that are important for making traditional buildings exist in the modern world, which is that you got to lay water pipes without ruining it. You got to lay internet, and you got to lay electricity without just, tagging plastic cords onto the outside. So trying to integrate modern services into traditional buildings in a sympathetic way.
Tell us about the jewellery space you have within that, and how many artisans do you have working there?
So jewelry is one of the great joys of Afghan craft. And I say that both because it's, something we can love and wear, but also because it takes advantage of one of the incredible natural resources that Afghanistan has, which is basically every gem except diamonds and sapphires. So rubies, emeralds, aquamarine, iconically lapis lazuli.
Which the Egyptians had to come and get it from Afghanistan, didn't they?
Exactly. Tutankhamun's tomb, that lapis lazuli is from Afghanistan. Topaz, tourmaline, aquamarine, kunzite, I go on. But that wealth in the ground doesn't matter to the Afghan people in economic terms unless you can make a finished product out of it. That's really where you can build an economy off of it. And so we have students that train for 3 years in the institute, and then they graduate, set up businesses, and we help them to export. So we have dozens of jewelry graduates who've set up businesses. A number of them are working in the Old City now, women and men who are exporting to Museum Shop, the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, 10,000 Villages, a wonderful store in America, Ishkar, a great sort of London, Paris-based e-commerce site. Mm-hmm. So all of these little businesses are sitting there in the Old City producing.
And they are creating using their traditional crafts. So it's all hand done, and they are learning to carve stones, create metal shanks.
Yes.
I'm wondering, do they have to slightly adapt their design to suit a Western taste if they're selling in different countries?
They absolutely have to adapt, and that's part of the challenge and the fun of it. So the Institute is very much a trainer of traditional techniques. This is about, traditional Turkmen jewelry and particular filigree work and the way that stones were polished and set, etc. So they're learning a lot of traditional techniques and motifs in their first 3 years of education, but they're also learning about design and business. So they're learning about technical drawing, chain making. They're wonderful at handmade chain making. So then the question is, how do you sell? And this is where they are doing what artisans have done throughout time, of innovating and working to patrons and clients. And that's where Pippa Small is probably the greatest example of the way that a designer interacts with an artisan and a group of artisans. She will come and sit with an individual artisan, and I just watch her eyes light up. And sometimes they don't even use a translator, and the two of them will draw things, and that will be about an Afghan artisan. I'm not going to say her name because she's in Afghanistan, but
yes.
An Afghan artisan showing particular motifs that she loves and where that came from traditional Afghan jewelry, and talking and choosing stones. Why is the emerald best here, or why is the tourmaline best here? And then Pippa will take what she knows will sell in London. So she's taking what will work in a market sense and what works for her aesthetic, but she's doing it with this Afghan artisan so that it has a very particular Afghan root to it. And it will be a collaborative design process, celebrated with both of those people. But ultimately, Pippa is creating a route to market, and she has, in some ways single-handedly sort of rebuilt, I would say, the new Afghan jewelry industry.
And you have other designers coming out. I think at one point you had Vicky Saj, didn't you?
Vicky has been a wonderful support, not only to Afghan artisans, but Saudi artisans as well. I think the willingness of people to travel to Afghanistan has gone up and down over time, as you might expect. Pippa has been traveling there throughout, and I was there very recently as well. And I think the most incredible designers are those who travel to the countries in which we work, to work directly with the artisans. That's a big ask. There are designers and brands who want to work from afar, but actually I think we've learned from COVID that you can do quite a lot virtually. And the point is that we're sitting there in Afghanistan. So, our design center lead, Mariam Omar, or the teachers or the business mentors will sit there and over Zoom, and then we'll send samples. And so the designer can feel and can look at the quality of the stones and the type of filigree work, etc. So you can make it work from afar as well.
Just a longer process.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So is it fair to say that some of the people working in Kabul at the moment with Pippa are some of the lucky women who are actually having an education right now?
Yes, I think that we are able to operate so much more than I could have ever expected, but it's incredibly variable. Mm-hmm. And what matters is that we have continued our work throughout. We never stopped. And so we as an organization and our staff are known and trusted by everyone around us. So there isn't anything hidden. And so that enables, as you say, the lucky women who are able to continue to engage, that they're able to do so when they're in the female-only space that we have, for example.
So is that one of the major challenges when you go to set up new Turquoise Mountain, that you are dealing with local governments? Is that one of the big challenges?
Yes, I suppose. Well, we were set up to work for Afghanistan, as I explained. But as I've thought of other countries and decided to set up other projects.
So how many other projects are there?
So there are 4 in total.
4.
So Afghanistan, Myanmar, Saudi Arabia, and the Levant, Jordan. The point is we work where heritage and communities are under threat. So that looks like conflict a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. But in the case of Jordan is not in conflict, but we're working with Syrians, Jordanians, and Palestinians, many of whom are refugees, etc. In Saudi Arabia, that's not a country in conflict, but that's a country growing in the economic rate of knots and trying to preserve traditions and employ mostly women with those forces of modernization. That's a different kind of threat, which is in some ways almost more powerful around the world. But I work with some of the most difficult, particularly if we're talking about Afghanistan and Myanmar, some of the most difficult governments and regimes in the world. I mean, the international community does not have a relationship with those two governments. So the key thing is that we're completely neutral. I don't have an opinion about the Taliban government. If I have an opinion about being grateful that they are allowing us to do some things or some things that I wish they wouldn't do, I'm not going to say it. That just ends my operational ability tomorrow. I am completely neutral. So, but in some ways that's helpful because it's not a question of whether I am supporting the Taliban government or against them or whether I'm speaking out against. I just don't do that. And so, yes, it's a challenge, but it's sort of baked into what we do. It's not, that's by design. So I think working with those governments and just the operational reality, yes, it's a challenge, but it's by design. I think the larger challenge probably is that because those are the places in which we work, nothing is reliable. So for the communities we work with, the things that are reliable for us, education, healthcare, clean water, the electricity working, is not reliable. Security, that you're not going to have to leave your home, is not reliable. And so the idea that I would just be working on jewelry, on preserving those traditions, doesn't make sense in that context, because a woman running a business is not going to be able to focus or come to work if her kid's not in school. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Or if she's dealing with the trauma of having left her home in Syria 7 years ago and not having dealt with that or begun to deal with that. And so the challenge for the families that we work with is that they live in conflict and insecurity. The challenge for us then is I got to run programs that meet communities at every level. So we run primary schools, we run a maternal child health clinic in Kabul. We deal with mental health. My challenge in that is just it's a very nasty funding matrix to try to get people supporting all those different things. But in the end, it is what works.
So you have to get really stuck into individuals' lives to enable them to take part in Turquoise Mountain.
Yes, it's a pretty intensive involvement, but it's what I love. I mean, I have probably 400 staff around the world, and 390 of them are in those countries, and 380 of them are from those countries. So it's not so much that we go and try to form a deep relationship. We just are there. We are there, and we'll stay for as long as we want to and need to have a deep ongoing relationship with artisans and their families and their communities.
I always think that jewellery actually is a very good antidote to mental health issues, because I think there's something very comforting and uplifting about making things. I think also repetitive actions, small repetitive actions, are sort of meditative in a way.
I couldn't agree more. We actually really see it here in Jordan because our jewellery programs here are focused on women, and about half are Syrian and half are Jordanian, particularly for the Syrian women who in most cases left their homes, 7-ish years ago. And there is no moment to deal with what they are dealing with. Often they're single mothers with young children who spend a lot of time in refugee camps. I mean, it's an unmanageable situation. But when they have been through a number of months in the course and then possibly going into setting up a business, particularly as they're studying, as they get some stability and as they experience what you're talking about, which is the real therapy of repetitive movement, of beauty, of interacting in an environment with a lot of other women professionally, the walls come down and they begin to really need to deal with that trauma. And so that's where we have needed to deal with mental health issues. But in some ways, that is a tribute to the power of making, because it makes people feel comfortable.
And using their hands.
Absolutely.
And I imagine by preserving some of these crafts and traditions, you're really essentially preserving their home for them in some way.
Yes, I think that preserving traditions, craft traditions in particular, is a really special thing. And, when I went to Afghanistan, I didn't have a background in cultural heritage. As I said, I was a science teacher. So I have fallen in love with it in the middle of a war zone so I sort of work and live in this world of international development, which is primarily about wealthier, more stable countries giving aid money to poorer, less stable countries. It's fundamentally about problems. It's about poverty. This area is the poorest. There's no clean water. They don't know how to treat their women well. They're corrupt. It's actually a pretty nasty entry conversation, even with the best of intentions. But if you are working in cultural heritage, in preserving these traditions with these women and men, it's a fundamentally different conversation. It's basically saying you have this incredible inheritance, this asset that is beautiful and joyful and nuanced, and it is priceless to you, to your community, but to the world as well. And actually, other people want to know about it too. And you can probably sell things that are based in it and bring income back to your family. Now, we can then build all these other programs to support what's difficult about life around it. But I do think that working in the most difficult of situations, in jewelry and in traditions, is a really lovely, it's a really joyful thing to be a part of. And that's what it's what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. And I do think that for women, in particular, who are living pretty difficult lives, who have left their homes, who are living with conflict, who can't leave their homes in some cases, it does matter to do something that brings a bit of pride and joy and relief and meditation. It is different than just getting a paycheck, I think.
Yes. And also memory of some of the things that they've left that they love.
Absolutely. And I find this with the Afghan diaspora in particular, that, connecting to Afghan traditions through videos of oral history and, stories and the making of traditional Afghan instruments. I think it's hard, but I think it is a connection to the past. And when you don't live where your inheritance is from, it's all the more important, if not difficult.
And what do you think we learn in the West? What can we learn from their traditions and cultures?
Gosh, I think we... I think it's like the gateway to just connecting us as humans rather than as sort of nation states. I watched this happen when we did an exhibition at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington. And actually, Pippa was a great help to a wonderful Afghan jeweler, Saida, who exhibited there, and they sort of jointly designed this piece. This was an exhibition about the restoration of the old city of Kabul and preserving these traditions, everything that we do. It's called Turquoise Mountain, Artists Transforming Afghanistan. And the way the narrative went was, people enter and they get a video with the very traditional narrative of Afghanistan, which is the way that people usually connect to Afghans. Terrorism, refugees, burqas. And then they enter the space and they just meet the country through 5 individuals, 5 traditions. So you're meeting all of a sudden a country, but a tradition through an individual, in many cases a woman, and through emeralds and through dyed wool and the pomegranate skin that made that red color. And that, that teaches you about the trees and the fruit in that place. And you understand that it's a very mountainous region. So all of a sudden you're on humanity. You're on nature and food and tradition. So I think that what we learn is not so much sort of one-way transmission, but more like it's just the way to connect person to person that I love.
I completely agree. I think jewellery is what brings people together and emphasises their similarities rather than their differences.
Yeah, I think jewellery is sort of most like that of all the traditions that I work with, because we wear it and we even differently from the bed covers that we use, it's a statement of what we believe in and our aesthetic. And I've basically worn jewelry made by Turquoise Mountain, in many cases made by Pippa Small, every day of my life for the last 17 years. It's actually written into my contract. But I hope I experience what the people who buy our jewelry also experience, which is I want people to ask me about my earrings. Mm-hmm. I want to tell them about where those stones came from and the person who made it. And even if they don't ask me, I note it a couple of times, and as I put it on, and it does connect us. Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely right.
And you get the story behind it and the wider story and the history.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. So what I want to know, though, is how did you come to want to work with this burgeoning idea and business?
It total serendipity. I was tagging along with somebody doing research in Afghanistan. It was an adventure, but I mean, I fell in love with the thing very quickly because it was just incredibly active. I remember the first weekend I was there, we were having a calligraphy exhibition at this fort, which is only half restored. There's only half of it that you could do something in. And so I was all of a sudden like helping with some other volunteers and the calligraphy masters curate a calligraphy exhibition in this garden. And it was just fun. You're just digging in to make something beautiful and figure out it's very operational. And I mean, for the first 5 years of my time there, I was working for and then running the Afghan project. And it was just stomping over building sites, making decisions about wiring and going to see the Afghan government. And that was, I love my job now. And I'm not sure that I have the energy to do the job I was doing then, but there was nothing. I will never love a job as much as essentially being the Afghanistan country director.
So, and you just haven't come back.
May I never come back.
You're still on your adventure.
I'm definitely still on my adventure.
And what translates best in other markets? Is it the woodwork? Is it the embroidery? Is it the jewellery? What translates best?
Jewellery. Absolutely. I think because you can wear it and because it is often women making it.
In a way, it can involve all those skills and crafts too, can't it? Because jewellery can be made of anything.
Absolutely. I think that's right. We've done some very funky sort of wood mosaic jewellery here in Jordan with a wonderful woman named Sharon Khazam in New York.
And how do you fund all these different projects?
Ooh, it's a great mix. So on average, 75-80% of our funding every year comes from international donors. So that's like USAID, the US government, wonderful fund called ALIF, which is the Alliance for Protection of Cultural Heritage in Conflict Zones. So large governments and foundations. And then the other 20-25% is from private individuals, and that's mostly US, UK, Middle East. That bit of it is incredibly necessary because Our primary health clinic, which saw 20,000 people last year, double what it ever has before because the need is much greater in Afghanistan, 2/3 of whom are women and girls, female medical director. I need private individuals to pay for that because I'm not a health charity, right? The US government's not going to give me money to run 100 clinics around a country because that's not what we do. It doesn't make any sense for them. So that kind of community support is very funded by individuals, but also because of the nature of the places we work in, the immediacy of being able to shift is so important. So when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, a lot of donors left. So we had funding from the German government, funding from a number of governments, particularly to fund education. It just stopped on a dime. So if I didn't have those private funders, I would have had to close all of those programs. So I think that the role of individuals, though it's a smaller proportion, is totally necessary and not replaceable in my sort of funding equation.
So not too much from sales yet, but presumably you build that revenue stream.
So the sales bit of it is totally central, but doesn't pay for other stuff. And what I mean by that is that we have worked really hard at it. You know, we've brought probably $17 million worth of products to market over the last particularly 10 years, but we've been working on it for longer than that. I am very proud that now washes its face. In other words, bringing those sales to market, I'm not subsidizing that. And in fact, that includes the design work that goes into it, certainly all the logistics and the packaging and the shipping and all that, right? That washes its face. What it doesn't do is kick off extra money to fund the clinic and the primary school.
Right.
In fact, it doesn't even fund the training of it. And the reality is that, when you're talking about handmade products, particularly in places with crazy logistics and security issues, these are not low-cost producers. And so in order for them to be competitive, if I took extra money out of that, I would just make the artisans less competitive. So I think that's actually, I would love over time, but I'm not sure that that's the equation. I would rather keep the price the same, sell more of it, get more jobs for artisans and fundraise for the clinic separately, if you know what I mean.
So now has His Majesty come to see his dream come to fruition?
He has. Those have been some of the most fun days of our time because, he has followed it very closely and knows a lot of the staff and artisans' names. And so when he gets to meet them in person, it's really special. He visited Afghanistan in 2008, so it's been a while. Visited Jordan last November, or the November before, so met all of the master artisans here.
And are you all collectively working on a coronation gift?
We are, but I'm not going to tell you about it.
Will it be revealed at some point?
I don't know. I have to think about that. It's Selma working on it. Yes, we have definitely thought of a coronation gift. But I think the thing that His Majesty would be most excited about, and we've spoken about it, is just to draw attention to what the artisans are making and where they can be bought. I mean, he has asked many times, how can we make it more clear that people can buy and can support Afghan women through buying? And so we actually launching a carpet line at Christopher Farr on the King's Road just this week. And, Pippa and her jewelry is a constant ambassador. So I think for the coronation, London Craft Week the week after will be an important time for us to show off what the artisans, in particular in conflict from across our projects, can do. And hopefully we'll bring people to buying.
Yes, and you might get some other outlets of people coming to take on all the different aspects of what's being created. But I have to say, the Queen Consort seems to love lapis.
Yes.
She'll be a great proponent, hopefully, of some of the pieces.
Absolutely. I must get on that. Absolutely.
We have a lot of listeners in the US and Canada, Shoshana. So I'd love to know, can they get hold of Turquoise Mountain products or get to see it at least?
Absolutely. If you go on turquoisemountain.org and click where to buy, there's a lovely map and you can figure out stockists. The thing is that the way to create larger scale employment for artisans is really about working with other businesses and not being a B2C, a business to consumer direct supplier ourselves. And that is because it would be the definition of insanity for me to say, with the 70 odd craft traditions I represent across 4 different places, exporting to every continent except Antarctica. My market is the world, which is ridiculous. I cannot No one would think that's possible. So I need to work with people who know their customers. So it isn't a case either of saying, you know, this is going to be a Gulf aesthetic or this is going to be a Western aesthetic, because what sells in London and New York is different. And what sold 2 years ago is different than what sold today. So I need buyers and routes to market, and that's designers like Pippa, that's interior designers who are doing a redo of a hotel. I need them to say, not only this is the colors and the motifs and the vibe that I need, but this is the cost I need. I need you to create a product that you can sell to me for $100. That's the way that we can actually match the artisan skills and the materials and the cost base to something that can actually get to market.
Okay, so you need businesses, galleries, designers coming to you and looking at these skills and commissioning.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we've got a call to action there.
Exactly. Write to me, please. Shoshana at turquoisemountain.org. No, absolutely. That's what we need.
Well, in London, at least, we're looking forward to Craft Week, so we
Yes.
can get to see some things there. So any designers listening. And can't wait to see the coronation gift. I know it'll be something really special.
We are excited.
It'll be interesting to see where it gets placed.
Yes. It will be interesting for me to see that too. Yes, I don't know enough and I'm not going to share yet, but it will be really beautiful. I'm confident of that.
Well, Shoshana, thank you so much for taking time out of your unbelievably busy schedule. We're really grateful. Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And nothing I love more than talking about jewelry. So thank you.
You came to the right place for that.
I did. It's a real honor to be on.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening. Now, if like me, you're going to go onto Pippa's website to look at the Zindagi pendant, 100% of which the profits go to the Zindagi project that she just spoke about. It comes under Afghanistan Aquamarine Double Pendant with gold bead on gold cord, and you can see underneath about the Zindagi project. So don't Google Zindagi like I did because it won't come up. But thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. For more information about this and other episodes of If Jewels Could Talk, please go to our website, carolwoolton.com/podcasts. You can find out more about our sponsors at fooleygemstones.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast feed, share it any way you can, and we love to have a rating and a comment. Now, we did mention the King in this episode, and from here on now, it's full steam ahead to the coronation. And as we're in London, we are going to have some coronation special episodes coming up, which are fantastic. So join me again in 2 weeks for the next Jeweled Nugget, when I'm going to be talking to somebody on the very tip of the world in Tasmania, Australia. You may wonder what someone living there has to say about the coronation. Well, it turns out a lot. And it's quite controversial. I'm going to be talking to someone who's created some of the world's greatest collections of decorative arts and supplied many historic items to the world's leading institutions, written numerous books and catalogues. He is a world-leading expert, and he has something controversial to say about one of the stones that takes a pivotal part in the coronation. So please join me then, and all will be revealed. Goodbye. If Jewels Could Talk with Carol Woolton is produced by Natasha Cowan, music and editing by Tim Thornton, graphics by Scott Bentley, illustration by Jordi Labanda, and you can find me on Instagram at Carol Woolton.